My name is Dane Wigington from GeoEngineeringWatch.org, and our purpose of our site is to expose the issue of global climate engineering, otherwise termed as geoengineering. We are virtually under assault right now. It's not alarmism, it's not exaggeration. This type of weather modification puts out chemicals and toxins, some known, some not known. Many people who try to debate this issue, if they ask you why they should believe this is going on, we have film of it happening, end of the argument. That's it. There's no debate, no discussion, this is not speculation. When we have films that we can clearly see are spraying, there's no denying that jet is spraying, period. We have interior films, interior footage, which I'll show in a moment, but the bottom line is that's not a condensation trail. Any notion that it is simply denial or complete ignorance. So this is, you can even see on this jet that each side of the plane, the plumes are different lengths, which means the nozzles are not aligned perfectly. You see different composition in the trail, also indicative of different materials being expelled from different portions of the aircraft. So again, this amounts to weather warfare, period. The U.S. has historically engaged in weather warfare around the globe. This is historical fact. We have data going back to Vietnam, 1968, Project Popeye. 1976, UN passed resolutions forbidding weather modification in wartime. So again, this is not speculation. We live in a society that's been trained to shut down when they hear the word conspiracy theory. They've been conditioned pretty well. But the bottom line is this is the issue that can't be ignored any longer. People can ignore Kennedy, people can ignore false flag events like Vietnam and even whatever happened on 9/11, but this issue can't be ignored. When in the North State, for example, we turn on our water faucets and nothing comes out, that's the end of the road. This is very recent. This is from 2 days ago. Al Gore, use of geoengineering to head off climate change disaster is insane. So although we don't have an admission it's going on, it's getting closer by the day, and it looks like Al Gore is trying to now distance himself from these programs that he has not admitted to yet. This is important media. They'll be seeing more of this in the coming weeks. One interior shot there. Again, we can't know from the variants of different planes, the different configurations of spray apparatus. This is an ongoing experiment. There's likely many different configurations. We see aircraft trails that have different color composition. So this is an ongoing experiment of which we are all a part, like it or not. Another interior, high pressure tanks. When this image was posted, the sites that initially posted it, a couple of them were taken down. This image appeared to be tried to be taken off the net as quickly as possible, but too many people downloaded it. It's out there now. More configurations. Obviously, there's a whole lot of planes with a whole lot of tanks doing a whole lot of something. So this kind of footage should not be ignored. Clearly, these are what would appear to be passenger planes, most of them with windows. So there appear to be many different types of aircrafts involved in the spraying activities. This is what we have. Again, global geoengineering, the ever-changing experiment, and we are, again, part of that experiment. Russian scholar warns of secret U.S. climate change weapon. We have Russia engaged in this as well. We also have China, and this is one of the reasons why it's so hard to get any sort of mainstream coverage, because the big players are all involved up to their eyeballs. So that's one of the reasons the media coverage is so sparse, but it's coming. What do weather weapons do? They wreak havoc in countries without anybody knowing they're even under assault. In the case of floods, droughts, all of this is a form of weather weaponry and weather warfare. And there is no arguing that we are all a part of weather warfare when our climate is being impacted the way it is right now. Again, countries around the globe, this sort of impact, nobody would recognize as being an assault. And that's what's so prized about weather warfare for the powers that be. Nobody even knows they're being attacked. Bridges, infrastructure, wiped out. You can literally bring a country to its knees. You can bring a state to its knees as well, especially a state that doesn't seem to want to conform too much with the federal government. You can drought them out completely. And that's exactly what's happening in California right now. This sort of drought in Africa has been used for decades. We know these programs have been going on, and their impact in Africa appears to be directly related to bringing countries to their knees and opening up the door for U.S. occupation. You have U.S. boots on the ground in about 156 countries around the globe. Not singling out the U.S. because other countries, again, as I said, are at this as well. Empty reservoirs. This is where California is headed today. I think we all know that. If we reach the end of this year without significant rainfall, we will be in free fall into a cataclysm that's never before been recorded. Our forests are going up in flames. As geoengineering impacts the system from top to bottom, it starts to feed itself. As you cut off the moisture for boreal forests, which are the lungs of the planet, the terrestrial lungs of the planet, and they begin to burn, that feeds into the entire climate cycle and begins to tilt it even further off scale. So this is a non-linear equation. Once it starts to tilt, it tilts faster and faster. These sorts of clouds historically have not been well recorded. Now they are. This sort of sky that many have become accustomed to and think is somehow normal is anything but. This is an aerosol coverage that all of you seem to have seen before. And many people have begun to accept this as being natural, but it takes a lot of material to block the sun to that degree, and all that material is settling down on all of us. We're all breathing it in. Anybody who thinks that's commercial traffic is in a different reality. Somebody certainly lost their way up there. Another scene looks like something from another planet. Again, this is something that people, it's come on so slowly that many accept this as being normal and natural when it's anything but. One more scene that we see increasingly around the globe, especially in recent weeks and months. I'll explain why I think this is happening later, but the spraying is definitely increasing around the globe very rapidly, and the effects of that are being felt everywhere. Now, a sky like this is important to examine. Many people would think there's no spraying going on, but if you look closely, you'll see what looks like layers of plasma in the sky. Days with high pressure domes like we have now over California, this is not uncommon, especially if you look toward the west in the evenings. These shorter trails that are very bright are still aerosol disbursements. They make the sky silvery white. We believe that these sorts of disbursements are related to making the air more conductive, which makes the ionosphere heaters, HARP, of which there are at least 24 around the globe, major facilities and many other smaller ones. It probably makes them more effective to create these high pressure domes. So even days like this are aerosol saturated skies still. This is a point I want to drive home again because it's imperative in conveying legitimacy with our issue. Semantics matter. It absolutely matters. When people Google chemtrail, this is what they come to, chemtrail conspiracy theory. I have friends with the Union of Concerned Scientists that have tried to clarify this definition by stating that this is a layman's term for geoengineering. When that correction is made, within minutes, it's erased and deleted. They watch this site very, very closely. They want people to Google chemtrails and come to conspiracy theory. On the other hand, if you Google climate engineering, in the first sentence it clarifies that climate engineering is in fact an application of geoengineering. So we have science. And this is what media never uses. These terms they don't use. Our local media here has avoided these terms like the plague because they seem to feel their job is to distract people from the truth. We'll go into that deeper later, but again, semantics, extremely important. Climate engineering, geoengineering. Scientific terms leads people to science, leads to credibility. Who's running things? Psychopaths run the world. This is not an exaggeration. We have 4% of society is clinically psychopathic. That 4% ends up in positions of power, inevitably, because they'll do things that you or I won't do. So we have what appears to be a very small group of incredibly psychotic people that literally run the planet. And I would not have believed this 20 years ago, but after that many years of research, you simply can't come to another conclusion. This document's important. It's only the cover page. It's on the cover of this site can be found at geoengineeringwatch.org, this document from 1966. It's a presidential document by NASA outlining the US weather modification programs as of 1966 with budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars even then, listing the agencies involved, DOD, DOE, Department of Interior, about a dozen universities. This is the biggest elephant in the room. This document, again, can be found. I found it on the NASA archive, so it seems somebody put it there for me to find. So we have the proof. US military wants to own the weather. Why wouldn't they? Many people ask, why would they want to control the weather? Why wouldn't they? It's what they do. They want to control everything. The weather is the most destructive weapon they could control. And they can conquer countries, again, without anyone knowing they were even at war. These little bright dots you see here are smaller radio frequency transmitters, of which there is an unknown number, that appear to be a part of these programs. It's not just the major facilities like HARP. You have a great deal of smaller facilities there too. Stealth terror, weather warfare, and the end of America. Again, weather modification is a very covert weapon that rulers can use against their own populations to keep them in conformity. We seem to be immersed in that right now in California. Weather warfare, beware the U.S. military's experiments with climatic warfare. Yet one more warning. There's ample documentation on the ongoing weather warfare, even from diplomats from other countries. Here you have Iran. Vice President claims country's drought is part of the weather war on the Islamic Republic. You've had also the president of Iran on the floor of the UN twice, trying to raise the alarm that his country was a victim of weather warfare. Our media does not cover it. Global warming drought linked to weather warfare. This has been going on in Africa, as I stated, for a number of decades. The more they spray, the less it will rain overall. It's important to remember that. We're not talking about cloud seeding to create rain. The more aerosols there are in the atmosphere, the less it will rain overall. Yes, you'll have deluges from moisture that wads up in some place and comes down because of a lot of convection, but overall, it diminishes global precipitation. 15 military leaders who say climate change is a national security threat. Of course it's a national security threat, especially when you're engaged in covert warfare with countries around the globe, literally ripping the climate apart. It's bound to become a problem. Shouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. Russia urges UN climate report to include geoengineering, and they did. The IPCC last September included geoengineering in their report, finally. Not admitting it's going on, but now the lump is a little bit too big to fit under the rug. And it seems Russia, at least for reasons that we can speculate on, is trying to shine some light on this issue, perhaps because they're realizing that if these programs go on, the whole ship goes down. U.S. climate change procedure based on UN's geoengineering governance and technology policy. This is just one of many documents that outline the global governance of geoengineering. None admit these programs are going on, yet we see the full apparatus for their governance. There should be one more red flag that these programs exist. Public engagement on solar radiation management and why it needs to happen. You do have some now in academia who've shown enough spine to decide that the public should know. What a novel idea, that we should know we're being sprayed like lab rats. So at least we have a few starting to speak out. Global warming versus climate change. This is also important. The term climate change came into play in about 1998 when we had the warmest year on record. And because I believe at that time the global power structure decided it would unleash the full scope and scale of geoengineering, they needed a term that would condition people to accept massive temperature fluctuations like 50, 60, 70 degrees in a single day. Thus the term climate change came into play. And it is a term, again, to try to condition people to accepting massively geoengineered weather systems with massive temperature fluctuations that is more related to geoengineering than it is to global warming. So they changed the term. A brief history of false flag attacks. Why government loves state-sponsored terror. How many false flag events do we need to have before we wake up? Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin was a false flag event. We have a dozen other false flag events. This is business as usual. So it's about time that we wake up and realize that any premise necessary will be used by the power structure to start wars of aggression on other nations, or perhaps even to lock down their own populations. And that's what we see occurring now in the US. How do you pay for all this? A lot of people ask that question as if it's taxpayer money. Those with the printing press can pay for whatever they want until nobody accepts what they print. This is a recent release, $8.5 trillion unaccounted for by the Pentagon since 1996. That amount is almost equal to actually it exceeds their total budget amount that we know of for that time. And this is only perhaps part of what we don't know about either. This is not necessarily the whole thing. So the bottom line is they can pay for whatever they want so long as the dollar is the global reserve currency. And that's something that is coming to a rapid end, which makes the power structure more dangerous as the walls close in on them. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a growing but neglected global epidemic. We're all frogs in boiling water right now, period. Whether we realize it or not, whether we feel healthy or not tonight, we're all breathing this stuff in. It's clogging us up slowly but surely. It's absolutely happening. We're not speculating. We have about 5 dozen lab tests from Shasta County alone. We know this material's in the air, and we know we're breathing it. There's no speculation on this. This is a bioaccumulative metal. It's just what we know about is lethally harmful. So this is a problem we all are experiencing to some degree. 1 in 3 older adults now dies with dementia and or Alzheimer's. Doesn't mean they die with it or from it, but they die with it. And all of us, again, are somewhere along that path. Cognitively, we all have this stuff in us. It's affecting us all to some degree. This is an older chart. I've used this chart before, but it's important because it shows the escalation for autism. We've gone from 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 50. That's a 10,000% increase. That should alarm people. So why are people watching American Idol and football and drinking beers and having tailgate parties? We're immersed in an absolute crisis right here, right now. So my attempt is to convey that message. The global depopulation policy killing us softly. How do you cool a population without panicking them? You know, I've stayed away from this subject in very much depth because I'd hoped people would come around and just to the simple notion they're being sprayed like rats day in and day out. But it seemed not enough have. As long as McDonald's is flipping burgers and Walmart's open, people seem to think everything's okay, but it's not. It's not. And this will come to a very abrupt end very soon. On the course we're on, there is really no denying at this point that Agenda 21 and eugenics appear to be a part of this equation, along with a lot of other things. Too many people want to put it in this box or that box. There's a lot of layers to this onion. This is one. U.S. admits to bioweapons tests. There's a very long list of absolutely documented U.S. biological testing on innocent populations. Many nations have done it. And this is, again, this is a hard reality that the American population will face soon, one way or the other. Heavy metals acting as endocrine disruptors. This is extremely serious. This equates to our reproductive abilities, hormonal production. It affects life and our bodily systems to the core. And this should alarm everyone. Obama, let's just cope and get along and go on, right? This is sort of like Bush said after 9/11, that let's just everybody go back and go shopping. And it's what the government wants us to do, just to do nothing. Can geoengineering save the planet? You have a lot of dialogue right now with a lot of very, very frightened meteorologists, scientists, a lot of people from academia that are either mentally retarded, clinically blind, or paid liars. There's no chance that anybody with a high double-digit IQ doesn't know what's going on up there. And I've talked to a lot of people from academia. I know a lot of them. A lot of them know, and they're scared. They're very scared. I had NOAA scientists a year and a half ago tell me off the record they're, quote, alarmed as hell. They don't know what to do about it because they have no First Amendment protection. So any notion that geoengineering can save the planet, we already know the answer. Geoengineering is killing the planet. The population bomb threatens the peace of the world, so what are we doing about it? This is something you'd expect the global elite to say, and I say if we're going to cut population, we should start with them. So, and this is their motto, the eugenics, the foundation of globalists. It's always been the case. We have David Rockefeller on the record stating that 95% of the population needs to go. And a lot of people have never seen these quotes, but they exist. So it should not be hard to connect the dots here. And at this point, we are all not only expendable to them, but we are a liability to them. It's something we need to remember.